My name is Mark Stephenson. I'm also a co-founder of Epidaurus Health. Daina and I work together on building a software service for companies to help them manage their risk, specifically around pharmaceutical benefits. So it sounds like a lot. I'm sure we'll get into it, but thanks for taking time with us tonight. Look forward to the panel with Cyrus and Steve.
Thank you. And perfect leading. Cyrus.
All right, thanks, Ed. Hey, everybody, my name is Cyrus Schenck. I'm the founder of Renowned Skis. It's a high-tech ski company based in Burlington, Vermont, which subsequently led me to meet Steve, and now the co-founder of Mission V Sports as well, and work with Steve Hayes here.
And last but not least, Steve.
Steve Hayes, co-founder of Mission V Sports, and as Cyrus said, our paths crossed due to my interest in his ski company. And what we've done is incorporated some of the technology that he founded with his ski company, and we have transitioned or pivoted that into the construction of athletic sports floor assemblies, which is an area that a lot of people probably aren't familiar with, but if you turn on ESPN on any given night or weekend, right now you'll definitely see some of our work product. So thanks for having us, Ed.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before I begin the questions, I want to let the audience know that please, I got one rule. The only rule that I have is that please submit your questions. I believe that how we do it is through the chat box. So type in your questions and we'll see them. If we're probably going to go through the panel probably for about an hour and then take all the Q&As, or the Qs, we'll give the A's, turn the questions, and the one rule is this has got to be very interactive. So please type away, no matter how small, how big the question is. Let's hear it. I want to hear from the audience. So please take the time. That'll be great. All right, so let's get going. So my first question is going to go to Daina. It is counterintuitive to see new companies or established companies grow during the hard economic times. Yet, somebody like Southwest Airlines, JetBlue, and Home Depot all have grown during economic downturns. My question to you is, what do you think is some key potential drivers that are fueling that growth?
In the case of Epidaurus Health, you mean?
Oh, yeah, that will be fine. Yeah.
Okay. The timing for us was fortuitous. 2020 was a booming year for digital health, simply because of necessity. Telemedicine has exploded because remote primary care sessions have become the norm. And seeing as our product involves virtual care, while it's not telemedicine oriented, enabling providers and patients and pharmacists to come to decisions remotely is certainly a part of the product. And so the fact that digital health is on an uptick, there's a lot of demand and a lot of interest, growing collaboration, especially. The timing was just very fortunate, and we expect that to continue in 2021. And I would imagine, I think there will be continuing demand also for innovations in AI and machine learning for healthcare, which is an area in which we're seeking to innovate in as well.
Okay.
Ed, I think if I could jump in really quick.
Sure.
So obviously we've all been affected by COVID, and in some way, some more than others, but for an industry like healthcare that's massive and oftentimes very difficult to turn, it's like a cruise ship, it's hard to sort of navigate such a large industry and make change very quickly. To Daina's point, I think the pandemic forced patients, but also providers to react very quickly to a changing world. And that actually sort of sped up from a technology perspective, at least for us. I mean, it sped up the adoption of new tools. And that's obviously the space that we're in. We're trying to build a a new way to manage pharmaceutical benefits for people, and it immediately gave potential customers of ours. It reduced the barriers of discomfort because they all of a sudden were talking to a doctor on their computer on their iPhone, and that obviously probably was not something they were doing before COVID happened. So it very quickly advanced and sort of sped up, I guess, the adoption of tools like what we're building, and it made it it really broadened and made the potential customer base much wider for us, just because of the fact that people were much more comfortable now doing things over Zoom, doing things on on an app, and that's obviously the market that we're in, is building that kind of an app. So,
okay, Cyrus and Steve, any comment?
I'll go ahead and jump in. What COVID opened in terms of doors for us was that we had somewhat of a normal schedule, if you will. We work in gymnasiums. Gymnasiums are in schools. Most of the work was being done at certain times of the year during the holiday season. What COVID did was when you took all the students out of the buildings, it really kind of changed our typical schedule of when we were doing these types of activities, replacing floors, repairing floors, and that really changed a lot of dynamics from what we were used to, but also was just kind of a breath of fresh air too, because it did allow us to still have those revenue sources even during a pandemic.
Okay. Along those lines, Steve, as we all know, economic downturn creates need. For example, we all have seen that at the beginning of the pandemic, we all needed PPEs, or actually our health workers needed more PPEs, right? So I think you started talking about how you adjusted. So you clearly needed adjustment and to meet the needs of your clients. So have you changed the way you approach your clients during the current economic climate?
I don't know that we've changed the way that we approach them or the way that we go through the process of informing our clients of what we offer. But there's definitely been a swing in our, like I said, in our normal kind of calendar, so to speak. And it's been stretched out now, to incorporate all times of the year. And that's been healthy, quite frankly, for our industry. And I think it's been a breath of fresh air because, you get used to the same old grind year after year. And COVID forced us to pivot basically and be prepared to work at all 12 months out of the year, really, is what it turned into. So.
Okay. Cyrus, any comments? You're kind of quiet over there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I'll speak more specifically to the ski side of things. I'm a little more familiar with the day-to-day, and I know how we reacted to that. And, we as a ski company, we're obviously providing a product to get outside, which has been a big boom, right, in this time. A lot of folks, when they're stuck at home, they're just looking to get outside in any way possible. And we all know how hard it was to find even a used bicycle earlier this spring. So for us, we had a particular challenge just because though we sell an outdoor product and people want to be outside, and COVID, in the fall was certainly expected to ramp back up as it did. Our product is tied to a resort oftentimes, right? It's tied to another business and their operations and their procedures and their regulations and whatnot. So we had to mostly actually adapt our marketing and how we communicate to our potential customers in a way that made them feel comfortable to still purchase a ski to get out on the mountain. So for example, we would just offer, if your mountain doesn't open, we'll take the ski back. And no one's taking us up on that, but because most people end up getting out there, but we've actually just had to become a lot more nimble with how we communicate to our customers. The actual supply chain for us, fortunately, has been relatively smooth sailing, mostly because in the ski world, at least the lead times are so large that many of our orders, many of our placement stuff that we had locked in had happened before the pandemic even shut anything down. So on that side, it was pretty straightforward. And we mostly just had to do about face with some marketing that we were doing on the ski side of things.
So if I may just stay with you for a little while, you own two companies, right? Renown, and now you're part owner with Steve with Mission V, correct?
Right.
So how do you keep two companies? I mean, it's hard to keep one company profitable. So how do you manage to keep two companies profitable? And which and I believe they're different products, skis versus equipment, right? So how do you manage it?
Yeah, I mean they're very different in their end result, but I think the process is relatively similar. The first step one is I have a great business partner. Steve is a great guy to work with, and I'm very lucky to have him as a partner in this venture, and he pulls a lot of weight. So step one is go into business with somebody you trust and provides true value to the team. So I certainly cannot take credit for doing both by myself by any means. It's a lot for sure. I mean, Steve and I have talked about this before, and selling skis and building Renown has been a hard. It's been a lot of work, and sometimes it does pull me away from Mission V more than I thought I should. But I think communication, keeping a lot of communication open, and keeping things rolling is the best way to do it. And obviously, yeah, sometimes you end up working later nights than you expected to, but we all do that, right?
I think, Ed, one of the side effects, intended or otherwise, of COVID is that since we're all so close to our computers and our devices, I mean, I'm involved in multiple businesses as well besides Epidaurus, but we're able to be nearby and probably overwork ourselves, which for those of us that are entrepreneurs, we're kind of used to that. But it has presented an opportunity to to work on things that outside of the 40-hour work week, that we may have all been used to back in 2019, that as soon as 2020 hit, everybody was working from home, and you could start earlier and end earlier if you had to get your kids, that sort of thing. So, I mean, at least for businesses like Daina's and myself, we, being that we're a digital company, everyone's already on a remote device anyway. It really was fairly easy for us. I'm sure for Cyrus and Steve, it was slightly different just because they're delivering a physical product. But the idea is, when you're sitting near a computer or a sketch pad and the ideas are coming, especially when we're cooped up inside and trying to, brainstorm about something, it did present some opportunity to sort of always be near something that you could put some energy on that wasn't, just being at home. So.
And Ed, if I could just jump in real quick.
Absolutely.
One of the things that Mission V had going for it is we didn't have any sales in 2019. So anything that we did, because we were still in the process of kind of getting our alignment of our IP so that we could roll out the product and start selling it into the marketplace. So for better or for worse, 2020, we could only go up in 2020, and we did have a good year, but like Daina said earlier, some of it is just the timing, and the timing worked for us the way that it played out. So that sometimes you have to get a little bit of luck to go with all the work that goes behind the scenes. So
okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Let me shift gears a little bit. I wanted to. This question is going to go to the Epidaurus team. We were talking about how to keep what we got, right? And then I'm curious to see, has it been difficult to locate funding, in this, well, we're in a pandemic, so yeah, might as well use it, might as well call it a pandemic. In this pandemic, has it been difficult to locate investors, angel investors, venture capitalists, and knowing that it's a limited supply of money, how do you basically tap into that?
I'll take that.
Sure.
Yeah. So we've been fortunate. The starting or the seed fund for this project for us came via the NSF through the Small Business Innovation Research Program, which we were awarded the grant in 2019. So up until this point, we've been drawing on those funds as we build out a demo that we're preparing to present to customers and, of course, potential investors. So one thing that I found has been very helpful is just attending virtual conferences and networking virtually. It's just a different experience from attending a conference in person, but I attended several of them in the fall, and it was a very different, almost ultra efficient way of meeting people, because instead of circulating in a room with a glass of wine in your hand, hoping to strike up a conversation with a passing stranger, it was very targeted. So you go on and just see everyone's interests, and the system was matching you based on, what you had stated you were attending for. So there was no shortage of virtual meetings, and we've met a lot of potential investors with whom we're having a conversation via that channel. And so, yeah, I would say that was probably the most helpful.
I do think that we were there to a certain degree, and Daina did a good job of explaining kind of how she's pivoted. I think we definitely, for a while when the pandemic started, we were just kind of starting our moment to start reaching out to new person meetings, with different types of investors, or at least even potential clients, things like that. And then, of course, that was all upended, and we spent a few months really just digging our feet in and building our product, because we did have that, the NSF grant that thankfully we did get, and that's a great program for anybody out there that's that's looking to do something like this. It's very helpful. It was very helpful in us pinpointing our market, and we met some great advisors and some great other people, entrepreneurs. But it definitely, for me, I'm a face-to-face meeting kind of a person, and so those meetings were gone, at least the opportunity to have those meetings, and they're just starting to sort of come back. And so thankfully for us, as she mentioned, there's been some really good reaction from the market, in the sense that they're putting out the availability for some virtual conferences, or you're just really just having to do deeper research into the types of people you want to reach out to, either the funds or the strategic investors or whoever it may be, and just contacting them, directly, rather than talking to somebody.
Okay. Steve and Cyrus, how do you, in your line of your business or businesses, how do you get people to help you out?
I'm going to let Cyrus jump in on that one, because I think he's had a little more experience with Renown than we've had with Mission V. So go ahead, take that one, Cyrus.
Yeah. I don't have any experience in the middle of this pandemic directly raising funds. However, we are about to start that process, so I'm actually really curious to talk to you guys further about that. But yeah, I think in the past, it's very different than right now, so I can't really specifically speak to it. I know where I'd start is just where my existing network is, depending on how big you're looking to raise. If it's just something for to keep you going for through this hard time, challenging time kind of thing, or if it's something to really boost and accelerate long-term growth. So in the past, though, it's always it's a game of networking. It's there's always somebody out there who I think will resonate with the story you're telling if it's a good one. So
the one thing, Ed, that I don't think that's really slowed down is the number or the volume of capital that's available. I don't think has really changed. I think it's just the method for which we all have to search it out and pitch ourselves. You still see companies especially in digital health, you see really, really big raises that have happened relatively recently. And so I don't know that it's necessarily capital has slowed down, especially, the economy and the stock market. Companies are doing quite well who may be. And so it's pivoting to find the right companies and figuring out ways to pitch yourselves in a different way.
Okay. All right. My next question goes to all four of you, and we'll go round robin, I guess, around the square boxes, I guess. Now, pretend that I'm an investor, right? My expectations right now is of smaller round sizes, lower number of IPOs, and lower valuations. So what tips would you give anyone in the audience of how to prepare for a meeting to increase my expectations?
Well, I'll jump in somewhat of a limited capacity, but if I was pitching our company to investors, I think a lot of it has to center around what's your vision, and where do you envision yourself when you grow up, as I like to say, or when we grow up, and you have to paint that picture to the investor of what that vision is, and try to get some consensus, and try to figure out if that vision aligns with the investors needs, wants, desires, what have you.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I can jump in, Ed. So, I mean, I was just going to say there that I think that you also have to sort of look at what's happened in your space, in your market space. And so for us, being in digital health, we've seen some fairly large raises, obviously very, very recently, and companies that are growing very fast. But also, as we talked about before, I mean, we've got a customer base and just everyday people who are much more comfortable using the type of platform that we're building. And so we're in a position to capitalize on that, which is essentially kind of how you have to pitch yourself is, look, emerging from a pandemic, here's how my company is going to capitalize on this. And whether that's a digital health company or a widget company, you just sort of have to streamline and tailor your pitch to the time that we're in. And for us, it just so happens to be that we're in a position to, I think, capitalize on the advancement of digital health in a very short period of time.
Okay.
I'll follow up on that. One question I've heard a lot from potential investors is, of course, what's the go-to-market strategy? So as Mark said, to be prepared, you have to be able to demonstrate that you've thoroughly researched the market, that you have a target customer that's well-defined, that you understand. We conducted, the NSF program required us to conduct 40 interviews, and it was such a helpful exercise that I just kept going. So we've probably done almost 100 with potential customers, just to really understand what is the need for what you're building. So being able to communicate that, but then also being able to show that you have a plan for overcoming barriers and bringing the product to market. Not the least of which includes also knowing your competition. That seems to be a top question that always comes up in investor conversations is, who are your competitors and how are you different? So all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the beauty of that question is that no investor, unless they're going to be dumping money in for, say, making some PPE or some masks or something like that, an investment should be, is for in the future. And while the world is a little slower now, I think it's like the best time to be hunkering down and working faster and harder while the rest of the world is just going a little bit slower. So yeah, I think this is definitely the time to be putting the pedal to the metal and a much easier, I won't say pitch to an investor, but I'd almost just challenge that back in and say why this is the perfect time for continuing to accelerate any kind of growth because the rest of the world is going so slow right now.
And I would say also just for disruption, it's kind of ripe for disruption because so many things have been disrupted that people are just sort of used to that right now. So if people, someone is a startup, founder or inventor of some kind, and they have a really innovative idea, a couple of years ago, it may have seemed crazy, but all of a sudden, now we're in a world where everything's crazy. So why not, try to go out and pitch something?
Okay. Thank you for that. That was very, very useful. So what I want to do now is turn our attention into now, how do we take current or future IP, right, and drive growth? And again, the concept being, how do we take IP and in this economic times and drive future growth. So I have a general question for the panel, and I'll begin with Daina. What is the value of a patents or trademarks or any sort of IP for any startup in any startup business in
I
general?
would say in our experience so far, since we're so early stage and we're just beginning conversations with investors, it's been, I think, very reassuring to them when we're able to say that we have a patent pending. And I think it's also it's important to carve out that territory, just to sort of have a position that, you know, is your own, that's defended, because you know, we're so small and we're going up against an industry of giants. I mean, pharma is nothing to laugh about. So so I think any ideas that we can define at this stage and protect is going to be an advantage to us moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I think investors are looking for not only the possibility, you know, for us, software licensing and you know, revenue from that, but the more IP that we can protect for future licensing, you know, or you know, if we want to sell that IP someday, that's attractive to investors, obviously, because it's potential revenue for the company also down the line.
Okay.
Or for partnerships, I should add,
Yeah.
as well, strategic partner.
Cyrus.
Yeah, I think on the ski side, it's pretty straightforward, and it's kind of ironically, it has nothing to do with the patents themselves, but instead like marketing and branding, because we work in a world where everything is so similar, and it comes down to marketing and branding. It's not so much the execution. Quite frankly, anybody can take a photo of our skis and have a computer trace it out and have a near replica produced and within days. So it's actually, and it's really hard to stop that. You know, creating a patent for a specific ski layup is kind of useless because it's so easy just to rip off and hard to prove if it was your actual idea, kind of thing. And you know, the shaped ski is a great example that anybody who's skied is on a pair of skis that was invented by one person, and every company I know of claims that they invented it. So it's kind of a hard thing to track back to. But the patents for us has actually been incredibly powerful for a marketing tool, is in a world where essentially skis are the same. And it's not quite that simple, obviously, for you, those of you who love skiing, but it kind of is. And it allows us to have a marketing story and a brand tied to something in which no one else can compete with us, right? Like we get to tell a story, because this is like what matters. It's the brand's story. We get to tell a story, and we basically get to keep people out of that lane for us going forward, which is incredibly valuable from a brand perspective, growing the brand. But when it comes down to a selling perspective, very, very, very few ski companies have patents, or especially patents that are worth anything in terms of defensibility. So it's kind of come full circle for us. Is like, once first the patent, you know, built us that lane. We built the, you know, we've gone down that lane for a while, and now as we look for, you know, the next stage in the company, it's now proving to be extremely valuable again to, as Daina was saying, the assuredness for an investor to know, like, oh, like we'll be safe with this. We have a backup, and it's, you know, essentially the U.S. government and the European Patent Office and whatnot that's essentially giving them that trust.
Okay. Thank you. Steve, anything you want to add?
Well, you know, we did something a little different with Mission V in terms of going into an industry that actually has lots of patents. I know that's probably hard to believe, that, you know, maple gym floors have all kinds of patents, but they're all very, very specific. It's a specific way to build that widget, okay? And then there's 35 widgets, you know, in the industry. What we did is we went and we looked at it a little bit more from, as I like to say, the 35,000 foot approach, where we basically got our IP in terms of how you could design a floor that could encompass any one or all of those 35 individuals that are out there. And so, we took an idea and really kind of, I guess, blossomed it, in an industry that is very familiar with IP, but we did come up with something that we believe is unique. And it's kind of interesting as we have to describe what our IP is to people. I know I have learned a lot about how to describe it so that it's not confusing. In an industry, like I said, where a lot of people own IP. And the other thing, just I think that's as we continue to grow, and Cyrus has it in renown with the skis, and now we've put it into the sports floor market, that no idea is too crazy. If I could tell everybody, listening, I mean, just don't be afraid to try and develop any kind of an idea. Now, they're not all gonna turn into something, but trust me, we've got things that are kind of in our pipeline where, they're crazy ideas, but then as you drill down on it, they make a lot of sense, and they really align with what we're doing in terms of the sports world.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a question, and it's going to be a little bit out of turn, but I think it's appropriate based on the comments that, the feedback you folks have contributed. What about foreign filings? What about protection abroad? And we have two different industries here, very, very, it's a dichotomy here. And I think I'm going to get some interesting answers. So that's why I want to ask it now. It's like, what about a foreign filing strategy? Daina, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I think for in the case of Epidaurus Health, at least at this point in time, foreign filings really don't apply. I had a chance to explore foreign markets a little bit last fall through the conferences I had mentioned. There were investment firms from abroad that were attending. So I talked to some people in Germany. I talked to some people in Switzerland. Spoke to some Americans that had liaisons in Hong Kong. But our product is just so US market focused. We're really drilling down into the problem of drug pricing and drug pricing channels in the US market. And it's a very particular use case that really doesn't apply in places like Europe and Asia. I'm not even familiar. So we're just very focused on the US right now.
Okay.
Yeah, for us, Ed, for digital health, there's obviously also ramifications legally here in the US for the laws that we have with HIPAA and other things, GDPR applying in Europe. So for us, it's actually simpler as we get sort of going as a company to focus here and make sure we can get a foothold. And then obviously if there was an opportunity to go abroad, probably our patent strategy would be part of that. But before that would even happen, we'd have a number of other things dealing with data protection and things like that apply in Europe that don't apply in the United States yet. So that we would have to deal with.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, actually, one of the real interesting components to our industry is that the majority of the gym floors in the world are manufactured, not just in the United States, but really in Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. That's where most of the mills reside that manufacture most of the gym floors, wood gym floors that are installed in the world. So that was kind of a whole new world, literally, for Cyrus and I, as we started to get into the foreign filing process. And I'll give Caldwell a plug here that obviously you guys were extremely helpful in directing us on how to achieve that. A shameless plug, but a plug nonetheless. I had zero knowledge of how to do that. I'm not sure Cyrus had much more, but you helped navigate us through that process. And you have to get guidance on something like that from a knowledgeable, trusted resource. You just can't do it because when you start looking at all the countries and all all the implications, you have to have some kind of a strategy. You have to have a way to make some sense of it, or you'll go crazy with all the filings.
And also, you also spend all your money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
very quickly. Yeah, I mean, patents are obviously not cheap. So yeah, knowing where you're going to go first, yeah, absolutely makes a difference. And I think with a physical product, I mean, you just got to know where it's being manufactured, where the biggest market is first, and then just drill down from there. So obviously, America for floors made a lot of sense because since that's where everything's or most things are made, and then from there backwards, kind of round it out to what other segments are patent covered. In this case, more turf and synthetic stuff, and where those were manufactured as well and sold primarily. And we felt like once we covered our bases, that you know, be deep enough that it was, you know, sure we could go up to the last like 10% or 5% or 3%, but the cost to get that last little bit was so high. And as long as you get the meat and potatoes, essentially, no other company is going to go after, you know, Turkey, for example, or Poland exactly specifically to try to circumnavigate you. And if they do it, then fair, they can have that, you know, that sliver. But you know, start from the top, go to the bottom.
Awesome. And Steve, I think you know, you can thank Keegan by, you know, we'll thank you by sending you some sort of like case of something. Yeah.
Make sure he knows that I said that. Okay.
I'm sure he's either watching or will be watching later. So we do appreciate that. Thank you. There's a question in the chat that it's again appropriate for the discussion now, and then we'll turn the discussion to some other topic. I guess in case of Cyrus and Steve, this probably is a bit more applicable to you. Is like, how do you decide which countries to file in?
Well, Cyrus, I mean, one of the things that we did was we tried to project countries where we felt that there were, again, knowing your marketplace, knowing your competitors, although competitor might not be the right term, we tried to identify where there was potential synergies with companies that were already in the marketplace that we believed we could potentially partner with. And it wasn't necessarily that we looked at it as countries where there were threats to us as much as there were countries that already had an established infrastructure of athletic flooring companies that we could potentially have a synergy with. That was really our approach as we looked in terms of what specifically which countries, you know, that we wanted to have a presence in and protection in.
Okay.
Totally. Yeah. And with skis specifically, the you know, we looked at just the marketplaces and where the majority of skis are going to would be sold. And obviously that was, you know, first off is America and then Europe as a whole. And within that, we started looking at what exact countries produce the most number of skis and consume the most number of skis. And it literally just tells you where you're supposed to go first. Yeah. And there's a point where, like I said before, you know, Poland, for example, we don't need to specifically file there because there's so few skis produced there and sold there that, you know, once you kind of have your broader bases covered, that, you know, K2 isn't going to go and produce a model specifically for that market just to get around your patent. Well, I guess they could, but it's at that point not really worth your time, and not sure if it's really worth the investment. That's at least up front. Down the road, when you have 200 grand to want to throw at the wall, go for it. But when you're especially in the early stage, you have to be very, very specific. And the number of times that Steve and I were on the phone, like, should we file in this place? Should we file here? Like, man, I don't know. This is a lot of cash. And you know, just have, like, you know, carve out the places that we, you know, felt made the most sense. And at the end of the day, I think we're really happy with where we ended up, and, you know, having a broad enough and solid enough foundation to, you know, leapfrog from there. And like Steve was saying, you know, whether it's, you know, synergies or partnering, or as Mark was referring to earlier, is licensing. It's a potential revenue source.
I would say for us that it's something where we would consider obviously the markets that we're trying to enter, and probably as a software company, if it's a place where we decide, okay, we feel like our software is, you know, would be a good fit for Germany or for the UK or for something like that, and it's something where we feel like we need the protection, this probably would make sense for us to go in. Okay. But the market's going to probably drive most of that for us.
I guess if I were to summarize it, your thoughts, it's ultimately it's a business decision that needs to be considered. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Our next question goes to Steve. When we think about IP, we often think about defensive role IP, such as patents, play in protecting core technologies and business methods. But what other roles does IP play for a business? For example, is it your experience that having an established patent portfolio helps you in discussions with investors? And we touched on this a little bit, so I just want to dive a little bit more into that.
Well, I think first and foremost, having the established IP, it streamlines the whole process. It streamlines the whole process of taking it to market. It streamlines the process of selling it to end users. It streamlines the process of, well, and I'm speculating here because we haven't sought any capital at this point. So, but I would have to believe that, and Mark maybe can speak to this as well, that having the IP obviously begins the conversation of what value, you have to a potential investor. And I think that's, if I understand the question correct, it was a long question that you gave me, Ed. So,
I know it's late. We have to, cut it down a little bit.
but that's, having that IP is the building blocks, or it's the pickets in the fence, as people like to say, to building that or establishing that identity that then would be appealing to investors.
Okay.
Yeah, Daina said that earlier. I mean, one of the first questions we always get asked from a potential investor of any kind is, what is your IP, and what, do you have a patent? How do you plan on protecting your IP? So having a portfolio not only helps to show that, your idea is unique, but it also gives a line for potential revenue down the road, which investors do want to see.
Okay.
And it allows you to also be a little free about who you're showing ideas to as well, because you're oftentimes, almost no investor we've talked to will sign an NDA. I mean, they just want to see your idea, and they're just not willing to sign NDAs at early stages usually. And so if you have a patent already in place and you feel really good about the patent and you feel good about the technology you're building, it's going to be a little easier for you to show off your idea.
Okay.
Well, because it's going to be protected.
And I think Steve said a while back that investors want to know what you want to be when you grow up. What's your vision? So I think having the patent in hand boosts confidence in that sense as well, that it shows that there's a clarity of vision, that you've done your homework, you've defined that, and that it's been validated. You've got something to show. We started the process before we even actually built anything out, but we had the design, we had the idea, we had the process, and we applied for the patent. So yeah.
The one thing I would say too, for anybody out there that's thinking about going after any government funding for their idea, the patent, having the patent in place was actually not something we had when we applied for the original funding, but as we've researched other rounds of government grants and those types of things, that is a big checkbox that the application likes to see. So for anybody that's out there that is thinking about applying to SBIR grants or any sort of other government grants or funding for their company, having a patent in place definitely helps reduce the barriers to entry.
Okay. Cyrus, I don't want to shut you down. If you want, do you want to, anything you want to add to that?
Just anecdotally, before, I guess on the early stages of Renown, that question came up often, and when we couldn't say yes, the number of times the conversation just died was insane. And the second we say, yeah, it's Chris File, it just kept going. So it was anecdotally, it was pretty crazy to see the continuation of conversations when we were able to say yes,
Okay.
it's got filed. So, which in our case, as a ski company, all skis are take a photo of the same thing. So in a world where everything is the same, there's a way for us to stand out heads and shoulders above other people, including large companies. So.
Okay. There's a question in the chat, and Mark, you brought up the question about NDAs, and again, for those of the audience don't know, that's a non-disclosure agreement, and I'm going to ask a question, but I think we need to kind of break this up a little bit. Do you require NDAs while you're still in the provisional stage? And I'm not sure if they mean provisional as in just the beginning stages or as in the provisional patent application. So I'm going to take the the former and say, I guess in your conversations, do you require, do you see a requirement for an NDA while you're still in this provisional stage?
I can take that to start with. I mean, first of all, investors won't sign an NDA for the most part. So even if you want one, they won't sign one. So you have to have a comfortable pitch that you're comfortable with, in terms of what you're sharing with a potential investor, especially in early conversations with that person. But if you're talking about folks that you may be bringing in to work on the project or something like that, then certainly you probably would want to have some NDA and confidentiality and potentially non-compete, for a certain period of time in place. The more of that you can reserve on your side of the table, the better, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, from an investor standpoint, I think that's for most a non-starter. You can certainly try, but it's generally not going to happen.
Yeah, and to add on to that too is, even if someone does sign an NDA, you have to prove that they caused damage and that they caused damage, which is really hard to do, right? So if someone signs an NDA, it leaks and something happens, you have to be able to pinpoint to that exact person that they said XYZ and that XYZ caused whatever amount of damage. And especially as an early stage in a company, the upside, the potential is your projections, which are kind of basically your best guess. And so it has to stand up in a court of law, which is really hard to do. So yeah, in general, NDAs are kind of formalities, I think. I would echo Mark, and I'm sure Daina is pretty similar, but I think generally speaking, not really necessary, unless I know Steve and I have had a few instances where we've had people sign them as a formality. And I think that world is, I think, a little more rooted with, I don't say old school, but the way I remember working a few times with flooring is, I think people tend to stick with their guns a little bit more after signing those. But I think that's a little bit of a smaller or different, a very a segmented example in the flooring, my experience in the flooring world. So
I think you have to be comfortable, with your idea kind of being left on the park bench and somebody finding it. So whatever your pitch is going to be, assume it could go public, because generally speaking, an NDA, even if you have one, is hard to enforce, number one, but most investors especially won't sign one. So.
Okay. There's Daina and Steve are on my left quadrant here. So if you guys have anything to add, that would be great.
I mean, I would just echo what Cyrus and Mark have already said. I mean, you're kind of taught, that's just your default, is to go to an NDA, as you get into the process, and really, I think kind of when the rubber hits the road, you begin to realize that, there's significant limitations to really what it does for you.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree. Little to add there. Yeah, just have a pitch on hand that, keep your cards close to your chest. Anything you're, like Mark said, not worried about leaving on a park bench for someone to find. That's general, but compelling. Yeah.
I think I was just thinking, Steve and I we had some signed NDA. I think was it right before the patent, the first patent was filed. I think there's one case, we had someone sign an NDA. It was weeks or months or maybe days before the patent was filed, and that was really just kind of a cover ass kind of thing. And that specific example, I think it made us sleep better at night. But ultimately, if your patent's good, you don't need one.
Okay.
There's another
go
plug
ahead.
there, Ed, but I said Cyrus was about to give him their Caldwell plug.
Hey, you know, anything we can do to help, that's what we do. Next question goes to Mark. In March 2008, Ken Chenault, the CEO of American Express at the time, said, and I quote, "A difficult economic environment argues for the need to innovate more, not to pull back," unquote. I'm going to assume that this is true for everyone and ask, how do you make this happen while dealing with the pressures of running your business today?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, you have to have faith in your idea, I think, number one, because we're all businesses. We have to support with revenue the businesses that we run and operate them, hopefully for growth over time. And that can be difficult in tough economic times, depending on the business that you're in, and how affected it is. But ultimately, if you're building a product that's innovative enough, and again, kind of back to what we talked about at the beginning, it's reacting to a time like we're in and hopefully getting ahead of the market, or at least at the leading edge of the market, where you can capitalize when things do get better. I think that's why, Ed, you see companies that have adapted doing well now, and generating revenue because they've been able to sort of skate where the puck is going during this time. And so as long as you're able to, which can be difficult if you're just getting started, but as long as you're able to survive from a revenue standpoint and keep the doors open, and even if you're just level setting through this time, but you're building something that's going to hopefully emerge you at the front of the line when it's all over, I think that's really key to getting through and making sure you're moving in the right direction during these times.
Okay. Steve and Cyrus, thoughts?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. Like I said earlier, is the world, and we won't be in a pandemic forever, and I really think that this is the time to go as fast as you can, while the rest of the world, in some cases, are forced to just be a little bit slower. I think this is to your advantage right now, and I think Mark pointed out a good caveat. Obviously, is money doesn't grow on trees, and sometimes your revenue is drying up, and so you have to, once you can get your baseline obviously sorted out, figured out, whatever it is. I know for us, as we looked at this year as we had high hopes for it as an outdoor brand, and it's been a little more muted than we expected, but we looked at it as a great example, a great time to do the best we can, so that when we come out of this, that we are already ahead of our competition. So I really think this is the time to go as fast as you can.
Okay. Steve, anything you want to add?
Well, it's a great time to be thinking about the next steps, the future, and where you're going to take it. And yeah, everybody is spot on. You still have to grind every day and make sure that you're covering all the bases of what you've already developed. But I think that's just a mindset, to be honest with you. I think it's a mindset that a lot of us entrepreneurs go into every day, and it's like, what's next? What what can I do with our current IP to further develop it into new IP that's going to be marketable? It's the way you look at every situation. It's the way you approach every day. You've got these core things that have to get taken care of, and the core business has to continue to thrive, or has to continue to operate, efficiently. But I think the reason why we're all sitting here today is because we understand what it's like to look out at the horizon and try to project what's next, basically.
Okay. Daina?
I'll add a quote to your quote, Ed. Winston Churchill once said, "A good crisis should never go to waste." So we're living through that right now. Yeah, I think 2020, you can see it as having been a disaster, but there's in every disaster, there's problems that emerge, that it forces people to come together, to collaborate. And in our particular sector, digital health and healthcare, it's really, I think, driven home to people the need for collaboration, sometimes even over competition. So it's a question of, as has already been mentioned by everyone on the subject, looking to the horizon, or having your ear to the ground, just listening and just being open to but unexpected opportunities for partnership. What are you doing that I need, or what am I doing that might help you out, and exploring those synergies, because there's no time like a time like this for that kind of exploration, I would say.
Thank you.
Uh,
Appreciate that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, is for those of you who can't make it work, right? Because obviously it's just like figuring out how to get to the 2022 when the pandemic's over is, and for some is just not a reality, right? And I think that just like the importance of looking ahead, and as Spark was saying, skating on the puck is going to be that's important, but it's also important to call a spade and move on. It's okay to close up shop, but the pandemic is also a phenomenal excuse, right? No one's gonna blame you for closing up shop if you have to during a pandemic, right? So if you can't make the numbers work out, obviously I think anybody who's an entrepreneur is like pretty optimistic, generally speaking. You have to be, but if your gut's saying it's not going to work out, then I think what you can do is also just close as gracefully and as quickly as possible, so that you can go on to the next thing. There's money in the market, and it may not just be this right idea. The timing could have been, the opposite of Mark and Daina there, where it's actually not going in your favor. But I think there's nothing wrong with reading the cards and deciding that, yeah, it's time to fold. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go for it.
Let me just to let the panelists and the audience know, I'm gonna ask one more question, which will go to all of you. We'll get your input, and that will take us to a good time to take some questions from the chat and the Q&A. We got two buttons here that we have to manage. So just so you know where we're headed. So we'll keep moving. So again, like I said, this goes to all of you. Thinking of the caveman analogy, and again, to explain that to the audience and to the panelists as well, a group of cavemen go hunting with spears for a brontosaurus for food, while one caveman with one spear goes out to fish and has a better chance of survival than the hunters that went out to get the brontosaurus. So one versus many, right? How do you, panelists, become that caveman that with a spear that goes out to the fish and strengthen your IP portfolio in this difficult times? So anybody can start. So who wants to be brave and take that one?
Well, I'll start. As mentioned at the beginning, Epidaurus Health, we're building a software as a service for pharmacy benefits, and that software as a service is blockchain based. So we're operating in a spot in technology that's been pretty hyped up over the last couple of years, and we're adapting it for healthcare. So in many ways, we're similar. There's a big race to adapt blockchain technology in healthcare. People see a lot of potential in it for data exchange, interoperability, security, transparency. So those are things you'll hear a lot for why blockchain is good for the future of healthcare. I'd say our spear, or where we're different, is that blockchain has also been criticized as a hammer looking for a nail, or just as a technology in search of a use case. So we're very use case focused, very process focused. We think blockchain is a fit for what we're doing. But I would say what differentiates us is that our design is based in a vision in the long term for supporting federated learning in healthcare, and blockchain happens to be a logical fit for federated learning. And for those who aren't familiar with federated learning is simply machine learning, where instead of pulling data into one central repository, you actually send out the algorithm, so it goes from place to place and trains on data in different locations as opposed to the other way around. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Mark, any thoughts?
Well, no, Daina summed it up well. I mean, I guess I cast a fly rod better than I shoot a rifle, so I'd rather be the fisherman. But I think that, you know, for everything that, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are on the panel or listening to the panel tonight, I should say, and you know, that the one that went out who's unique and took a chance obviously succeeded. That's not always the case, but it's not something to be afraid of. I mean, I've had businesses fail that I've been involved in, and I've had others that are successful. So still here, and, you know, able to move on and hopefully build other businesses, even if they didn't work out. So shouldn't be afraid to go out and try to build something and be the unique caveman that did come back, you know, with a successful outcome.
Steve?
Yeah, I think the best summary that I can provide as how to be the fisherman is, you know, we live in we're in a manufacturing industry where we're manufacturing these products, and historically what the industry wanted to do was, it was kind of a race to the bottom in terms of how do we make this end product with the cheapest way possible. And yeah, we would like for it to have performance value to the end user, to the players, but it was always trying to find, you know, could we use, you know, how can we get a cheaper pad in there? And what we did is reverse engineered it, for lack of a better term, and said, you know, there's better materials that are out there that we felt, you know, a certain segment of the market were willing to look at in order to provide a better product at the end of the day. And so we just kind of flipped the script, if you will, on what the industry was doing. And I think time will tell if we're going to be, you know, very successful, you know, with that theory. And but that's where we looked at it differently. And like I said earlier, you know, there's a lot of patents in our industry. Our patent is, I would say, very different than most of the other patents. And so in that regard, you know, we were the fishermen and not the hunters.
Okay. Cyrus?
Yeah. Yeah. I think for us, it is a little different because so much of our outward facing side of things is marketing and just being, you know, unique. And we've definitely leaned further into our kind of roots from a brand perspective and more tech and high end. We've leaned further into that during, you know, the past couple months. So, and as Steve was saying, I think that, yeah, the ski industry is just similar as well, where it is a race to the bottom for most companies. And we, you know, we just created a different business, the ski side of things. We just created a different business model. And by created, I mean, we just adapted the very, very normal B2C channel, you know, direct to consumer essentially, that has been extremely successful on anything from beds to razor blades to sunglasses. And that was like one where we were able to, you know, play our own game and take the price tag out of the situation, the, you know, conversation from a business perspective. So many ski companies, they live and die by the fractions of a penny that go into skis and whatnot. And so we decided to take an ultimate route. And the reason why we do that too is because we have, you know, the IP behind our idea that we can do that without a fear of somebody coming in and swiping it, because they can still manufacture cheaper than we can.
Okay. Thank you for all your, you know, candid answers. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to look at what the audiences send us. take a few minutes to answer those. And if we have time, we can have a maybe another round of questions. So we'll see what how this goes. I'm going to take the ones from our Q&A section here. So let's see. I think we talked a lot about NDA. So I think if this person has any further questions, they can certainly contact us and we can answer whatever other questions they might have. But I think Mark brought up great points as far as the need or lack of need for at the earlier stages of the provisional stages, as we like to say. So I'm gonna see. Let's see this one. And I guess this goes to all the panelists. Did you talk to other businesses as entrepreneurs to get their opinions on your product or services? And there's a follow-up question. So we'll take one at a time. So
1000%. Yes. Talk to anybody that'll listen. And that includes competitors. If you can find people that are entrepreneurs who are not even in your industry. We've sat down with friends who have raised money for totally unrelated companies just to get thoughts. I mean, really any nugget of information you can glean from anybody, if it's somebody in your industry or just a friend who raised $100,000 for something, or even less than that. Yes, and I would highly suggest that to anybody who is starting a business, to trying to file for a patent, to trying to raise money. I mean, try to find as many folks as possible to give you advice and give you their experience with it. Don't be afraid of revealing your idea or anything, because they're probably not going to steal it anyway.
Yeah, I second that for sure. I think a lot of people are certainly open to listening and providing feedback. And, I think it's a combination of, at the end of the day, it's your idea and you need to take this thing to market. So you have to have some level of confidence in what you're presenting. However, just the number of times I've talked with people and completely altered my idea or added a small, tiny feature to something that makes the overall a huge difference. They say there's really no new ideas, it's just like new applications of the same thing. And it's very true with ideas. Just talk with more people, you can get a much more rounded vision at the end of the day, and can be extremely helpful.
I would also add, I think you'd be surprised at how many people, even if you don't know them, if you reach out to them and you're not asking for anything other than a coffee or a lunch, how willing people are to help you. And so you may, don't be intimidated by somebody just because you don't know them. Send them a message on LinkedIn. Oftentimes, if you're not trying to sell them something, that's a fresh change for them. So if you're just saying, hey, I'd love to get coffee or do a Zoom call to get your experience, oftentimes that will come to fruition, because it's just something different for people like us that are always trying to get pitched something,
Okay. I'm thinking Steve and Daina, you guys are agree with everything that's has been said already?
Yeah, I would just add too, it's good networking. One conversation I found generally leads to another. So, if you hit it off with that person, not only have you learned about their journey, they're obviously gone further down the road than you are at that point, and you get their feedback, then the added bonus is they probably know other people, especially if they're in your industry. So it can only lead to always other potential connections as well.
Yeah, well, I would always try to leave a meeting with at least 3 other meetings that person can help you make connections with.
Okay. So the follow-up question is, how do you approach them? So Steve, I'm going to put you in the spot a little bit, sorry.
Well, my comment to the previous discussion was just going to be, don't be discouraged either if you attempt to contact someone and you believe that there's a good purpose. Obviously we don't want to be stalking people, but it doesn't always happen on the first request or the first email or the first phone call. I mean, Cyrus and I laugh. I did stalk Cyrus because I read about Renown Skis in an airline magazine, and I'm like, this is some, I got to talk to this guy. And right, Cyrus, you weren't real responsive to begin with. Yeah. So
I've got too, yeah, I get these calls too often, and then Steve flew out. So
yeah. So I mean, I think you do have to be persistent in the pursuit, obviously in a respectful way, but believe in yourself and believe in what you're pursuing. And I think those are all just good things to tell yourself every day.
Okay.
I think in terms of finding people, LinkedIn is obviously a great place to start. I think use your existing network to find people that they know and ask them to introduce you. And if they can't do that, then just reach out to them, yourself. Daina mentioned some of the virtual conferences and such. Those have been really good for us to meet people in an industry we weren't, all that familiar with healthcare. We didn't come from, we're data scientists for the most part. So we came from a completely different industry. And so those conferences were great, and really just can't be intimidated to try to reach out to folks, because you're probably going to reach out to 50 people and hear from, 5 or 10 of them. But the other 40, you just kind of have to move on and find another 50 after that, because it just is what it is. So.
Okay.
One thing I found.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Daina.
Because one thing I found that has been pretty effective in cold emailing is leveraging anything you have in common. Obviously, a common contact is the easiest, but even if in the absence of that, I've found if you've heard someone speaking on a podcast or an interview and they talk about a topic that's really of interest to them and that's genuinely of interest to you, and better yet, your project touches on that topic, I would say there's a high probability they're going to respond. If that's an area of research that's of interest to them and you say, I'm working in this, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that. And that's really all you're asking for. You're, like Mark said, you're not asking for money. You're not trying to sell anything. It's just around a common interest that's probably going to grab their attention as well, and show them that it's engaging. Yeah.
Steve, last word.
Well, yeah, real quick. I'm I don't know what the average age is on the panel or of the folks that are watching this, but I'm of an age that is not the most social media savvy, age group, walking around. And one of the things that we found is, social media can be really powerful, like having a picture of a gymnasium where an NBA athlete is participating in some activities, and all of a sudden it's on, Bleacher Report, and there's 14 million followers. And, those are things that I'm not afraid to sit here and say, I'm learning, throughout this process, is the power of social media. We've talked about LinkedIn, but Instagram is, is just, it's crazy, how you can put yourself in a position to have those connections or to make those connections, by having that social media footprint for us, because a picture is worth 1,000 words for us, to see that floor and then to see the activities that are going on.
I thought you looked familiar from TikTok videos, though. One person asked a question, again, sorry about jumping around, but the questions are good. This person always gets asked about IP value for valuation, and does it affect this, or is it just a checkbox? Cyrus.
Yeah, Cyrus,
Mark, sorry. Yeah.
No, Cyrus, go ahead and start off.
Yeah, just to take this one off. It can be both. I've had it be like, it always is patented. Sounds good. Let's continue the conversation. But at the end of the day, you don't just file a patent for fun, right? So there's always there has to be money tied to it. In the case of Renown, it's our ability to build the brand. It basically gives us like a clear runway to keep building the brand out. Down the road, yeah, could we sell a patent? Sure. Could we license a patent? Sure. In the ski world, it's definitely permission to run, essentially. So then that was like definitely a checkbox in that sense, which I think is probably pretty unique. Oftentimes, I think there's a lot of licensing opportunities and or selling of the actual patent itself down the road. But for a brand heavy business, yeah, it's an opportunity to run.
I was going to say that it's not going to impact valuation unless it's going to generate revenue for the most part. And so if your IP is something that you plan on licensing down the road and it's going to go on your balance sheet as something that is going to be bringing in funds that will impact the bottom line, then yes, it will impact the valuation. But I think most investors are going to be looking at, okay, what's your revenue, what's your projected revenue, what's your growth, et cetera, and they're going to want to know if they're exiting at some point, what the valuation will be based on the revenue at the time.
Yeah. Daina or Steve, any comments or?
I'm going to defer to Cyrus's answer
Okay.
on that one.
Same.
Okay. The next question I'm going to direct to either Mark or Daina. And it might be a little tricky question, but we'll give it a shot. And if this person needs further clarification, they can always contact us and we'll help them. We'll answer the question. Would the panelist or moderator be able to speak to this monetization topic as it relates to early pharmaceutical APIs and the suite of filings as development moves ahead? So active ingredients, I don't know if anybody would be able to comment on that. And I think if not, we can, please contact us and we'll be able to help you offline. So no need to, I just wanted to see if anybody had a thought. Active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, probably not, right?
Nope.
No. Well, please, whoever asked the question, we can definitely answer that offline. No problem. Another question. This one on trademarks. What trademark filing do you find useful? Company, name, product, or foreign? I don't know if anybody may have a thought about that.
This one's kind of a fun one, actually, because Steve and I just went through this and we decided to actually trademark the product name first instead of the company name. And we basically saw more value long term with that. And that was something that we were leading the conversations with. We want to have, essentially the Intel inside, and our Intel is Vert. It's not the name of the company. So we actually trademarked our the product first.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess to combat that, like Renown, we patented or we trademarked Renown first, and then the technology. Again, we're brand focused. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we don't have a trademark on our company name yet, but it would be probably our company name. But there likely will be, something from the product side that we eventually name that's not code named or anything right now. But so it just really depends, I think, on what you're going to lean into with how you're going to market and sell the product or the company. It could be obviously Google. There's a lot of products that fall under Google, but like to Cyrus's point, he's probably leaning in with Steve on the Mission Sports side with that Vert product versus selling the brand of, hey, we have this unique ski technology. It's called Renown, et cetera, et cetera. So just depends on what I think someone wants to sell and how they want to sell themselves.
And I think we may have time for one more question. The question is the acquisition of additional blocking patents a good idea for early stage ventures in this moment?
We have not done that, but I think there may be utility in it if there's a desire to really generate license revenue off of the patents. I think more so than selling the product.
Okay.
I mean, again, I don't have a lot of experience with those, but I think that to me is more of a strategy around I want to own the patents, therefore I'm going to collect licensing, revenue off of someone who tries to develop something that falls within that patent.
Yeah, I would just say that the act of trying to get patents to block for sophistication purposes is a total moot point. There should be a strategy behind it. I think just getting, trying to get some blocking patents to show that you can spend money is a tough sell for sure. But yeah, if I think in some cases it could actually definitely be useful. But I think it's very case by case, and certainly we're just looking like you're on top of it. That seems like a very tertiary concern.
Yeah, you kind of stole my words there. I was going to say this is something that that this should be discussed with a patent attorney and formulate a strategy. I think I agree with you. It's not like something you just do up to thin air. There's definitely a strategy involved, so it needs some thought behind it. So I agree with you. So Steve and Daina, any thoughts? We're coming close to the end, so
Nothing to add there.
nothing to add there. Okay.
No.
I don't have anything to add to that specific question. Yeah.
All right. Let me see. Do we have okay, I think this is our last question. Before having the search report back from the patent office, I believe, well, I guess this is a search report, meaning like a patentability search report. Do you think it is safe to look for investments without NDAs? And we covered this for NDAs already, so I don't know if there's anything further to add there.
I would say yes. I think it's just dependent on the again, what you're willing to share with a potential investor at that time, and also how desperate you are for funds at that time. Because if the lines cross where you're very desperate for funds and you have something you want to show, and desperate is probably a strong word, but if you're you really need funding at a particular time, there's nothing wrong with meeting with investors without an NDA. I mean, it's very common. And without patents, but you just have to be careful about what you share that you wouldn't want to have out there, publicly.
Yeah, also keep in mind that the kind of if you're this close and you need money fast, like anybody's gonna be writing a check in a short time period is going to be somebody who's probably not going to be stealing your idea. If you're going to show this to like a big company like a Google or Microsoft, I think somebody made a comment earlier about essentially Microsoft stealing their idea. They're not fast movers. Like they're not going to help you out if you need $1. So if you're looking for a quick investment, then you're probably talking to folks who are not going to be willing dealing, spinning that around and taking your idea as much. Obviously, just be prudent. You don't want to be throwing it out there, but I agree with Mark that your idea has to be out there sometime.
I would say also if they're in that scenario and they really are needing funds, it may be worthwhile to consider, friends and family round of some kind or something like that, rather than going externally, just because you probably can trust your friends and your family to hopefully not steal your ideas and, not require them to sign any sort of NDAs, of course, but rather than going outside of that group.
Okay. With that, I think it's time to call it a night. I can't thank you enough, Daina, Steve, Mark, and Cyrus for a tremendous hour and a half of rich with information. You guys certainly made this panel and made this topic tonight worthwhile listening to. I did, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, and from all of us at Caldwell IP, we appreciate all you do, and thank you for having you. To all our audience, thank you again for listening. Please stay safe. I hope that soon we can all go back to MIT, sit around the few chairs, listening to our panelists discuss these topics live, have some food and some drinks, and enjoy the company. So with that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Good night.